There's a lot of people that are catching strays and blame for this entire weekend. Like we talked about in chat, I think it's a societal issue where a lot of us are. It's a clear-cut division in the sense of either you're for somebody or you're just completely against them. And it puts a lot of people in a weird position where if you're not all in on hating this kid, or if you're not all in on loving him, you're just a sense filler. You whack. Like you need to pick a side.
Yeah.
So that was one of my issues. But you brought up something that I definitely agree with, and I want you to talk about it on the podcast.
Right.
Who are you most blaming for this entire weekend's debacle?
Now, I thought when you sent me this question, I had to sit down and think about it.
Definitely.
I would prefer to look at this from, like you said, it's either you're on one side. We've done pods together. You know, I'm a pretty fair dude. I try to look at things from both sides.
For sure.
We don't know the answer to that. To be honest with you, if you look at what we know now, which is pretty much all we know is that the draft is spoken and they feel like he's a 5th round talent. There's not necessarily a reason why. We haven't heard that from the NFL. We haven't heard that from teams who wanted to pass on him. If you even hear of how Cleveland talks about him when they were asked about his draft status, Cleveland said, yeah, we felt like he was overpriced. So basically they're saying that they felt like he was overrated through the draft process. But like you said, I was even surprised that they picked Gabriel over him.
Yeah.
So do you think Gabriel is a better There's no real answer from the NFL of why he switched to 5th. So there's 2 conclusions that I was able to draw, which is something that I lamented to you in the chat.
Yeah.
It's either, and I'm going to say the names too, because this goes into my point. When it comes to Shedeur's mock drafts, like I made sure to look at mock drafts to make sure that I wasn't just off base with how I thought. Aficionados like Louis Riddick, Peter Schrager, Mel Kiper, Rob Rang, Chad Reuter, Daniel Jeremiah, Joe Klatt, Mike Florio. These are all different publications, by the way. This isn't me being this is ESPN, this is Fox Sports, this is NBC, this is CBS. So I made sure to do my research so I knew where people thought, and I saw nobody who had Shedeur out of the 1st round. Not one aficionado. And let's keep it real. We could have opinions on who we feel like. A lot of people have what they feel about Mel Kiper, and cool, that's fine. But when you look at the mock drafts, according to the other picks, they are pretty accurate. They're not far off. So the question became, okay, so what happened with Shedeur? We heard about the attitude concerns. Cool, I see that. But for him to slip so far, was the NFL giving false information to? Because they get their information from. It's not just talent evaluation.
Prospects go into the draft before even declaring. They get a good idea where they stand with these teams.
Exactly. So they get that information from these teams before they put their knowledge out there for their mock draft. Do they evaluate talent? Yes. But most of their information comes from sources. Correct? All right. So could it be that the NFL is colluding against Shedeur, and that's the reason why he dropped so far is because of personal feelings about his demeanor, personal feelings about the things that his father has said of how he would intervene if he felt things were going wrong with his son? Was it that, and that's the reason why he switched? He fell to the 5th round, or is it the media created so much sensationalism around Shedeur that casual fans like myself, admittedly, weren't able to accurately predict his draft status of where he should have been?
Right.
And both of those, not just one, either or, both of those speak to how messed up things can be when it comes to not only how we see talent in the NFL draft, but as a society in whole. What's your retort to that?
I absolutely agree. That was, in fact, one of the first things that I mentioned in our text. I was like, the media has done such a grand job, because honestly, I think that's the point of it, is to go ahead and make it so sensationalized of pick either A or B. Ignore C, ignore D, definitely ignore E, because neither one of those fits these two scopes.
Right.
And like I said, we saw this politically. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a lot of people either here or there. And if you're over here like me, everybody looking crazy at you. What the hell's what you da 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 da? You know, all these reasons. The media has done such a great job, and I'm not complimenting them whatsoever. I'm just talking in terms of efficiency of making things so divisive.
Right.
And when it comes to Coach Prime, from the time that he announced that he was going to Colorado, there was a clear-cut division of I don't like this or I absolutely love this. There's no in between when it comes to most of the public. Although Twitter is a bad gauge of the public, in my opinion, because most people are weird. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you there when it comes to the media. I think us as fans, a lot of us were duped. A lot of us bought the Kool-Aid and we were ready to celebrate and all this, and then reality set and everybody looking crazy, looking to blame somebody.
Right.
But when it comes to blame, and this may be a hot take. I don't know. I don't care. It is what it is. I don't think enough people are talking about Coach Prime's involvement with this draft process with his son. I think there was a lot of things that were mishandled, mismanaged going into it. I get it. You're Deion Sanders. You're the GOAT. Make no mistake about it. But there were things when it came to handling your son, making decisions of, okay, we're not going to perform in the combine. That's an issue. There are prospects in the past that said, hey, I'm not performing. Caleb Williams did not perform in the combine. You know why Caleb didn't perform? Because he was a clear-cut number one
pick.
There was no questions about it.
Right.
Even Deion went as far as like, yo, I'm only interviewing during his combine. It's lure at this point of him saying, I only talk to 3 or 4 teams because that's what it is. He tried that same thing with his son, and that didn't work.
It didn't work, right.
Because the talent didn't match the talent, in my opinion, respectfully, absolutely respectfully.
Right.
But then there were things like, and again, this is me being a college football fan. This is something that you may not even paid attention to. You know, after the college football season, you get invited to these bowls. You get the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl. Shedeur got invited to both of those. Shedeur accepted the Shrine Bowl, which was perfect. But Shedeur did not participate in the game, and he stopped practicing like after the first day. Even though 3 of his top 4 receivers, three of his receivers were all on that team with him. Right. Like me as a quarterback, during this whole weird pre-draft process, all these teams are looking for things to not draft you.
Yep.
And like if I'm at a bowl game as a quarterback and my 3 of my top 4 wide receivers are on my team, we about to ball out. We about to go crazy. Right. I'm gonna look at my guy over there with a certain look. He's gonna know to go ahead and make this movement so we look real good.
Right.
He didn't take advantage of that, and I didn't understand why that was the case. So I think it was a lot of mismanagement. Plus, I'm not even gonna put too much stake in the whole. You heard Deion where he said, "Yo, it's only 4 teams that I'm allowing my son to talk to." That sort of thing. That's weird, but parents do that shit and you kind of ignore that.
And plus, it's Prime.
Right,
So,
right.
You know, Prime is going to talk his junk. Like, that's just who Prime. He may not
Exactly.
even necessarily mean that, and he may
Exactly.
because he like if anybody understands as a college football coach
Right.
for a reputable program.
Right.
He understands how the draft process works. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of hard for me to believe with as tapped in as Deion
That was
should
the actual
be
case. Right.
as a college football case. He should understand the gravity of the situation of him saying that. So I'm sure there was some calls made from Prime like, yo, I know I said that. And he even kind of stepped away from that publicly. Like, people don't give Prime credit. He did kind of be like, hey, well, wherever Shedeur goes, he goes. I'm not going to step in and tell him not to go nowhere. He did clarify that.
Yeah.
So I think that's just Prime.
And that's why I said I didn't put too much stock in that. Yeah. But, you know, people are going to use these weird reasons. But, you know, that was my main. I mean, honestly, I just think Coach Deion Sanders is so revered within a lot of us football fans. I'm not even just talking about us being black men. I'm talking about football fans. Deion Sanders is so heavily revered and idolized. Like, that was one of my first Supermen as a kid. If it wasn't, you know what I'm saying, if it wasn't Macho Man or something, Bret Hart, it was Deion Sanders. You know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of us make the mistake of, well, Deion doesn't make any mistakes, and it's a lot of Bill that's always getting shot for Deion because of how much we love and respect the man. And I just don't see many people really talking about Prime's involvement of shit. I mean, that's his dad, and that makes sense, makes perfect sense. But it just seemed like he needed like an agent. He needed some proper representation to get his son set up for hopefully success or whatnot. But
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to how Deion feels about the involvement of teams or what they're going to do with drafting his son, the comp that brings to my mind is, of course, Eli Manning, right? Do you feel like Prime gets most of the blame for that? Because I don't remember the Eli Manning situation of how his father felt about, Archie felt about where Eli was traded. I don't ever remember that being public knowledge before draft night.
No, it came out that night. Yeah,
that night, right? So,
or that morning.
Do you feel like if Deion had that feeling but handled it privately, like behind the scenes, maybe this wouldn't have happened to the extent that it did? And another question: how much blame do you actually put on the actions of Deion Sanders that translated into the fall of Shedeur's draft stock? Those two questions.
Got you. So, the answer your first question, when it came to the Mannings, they're essentially been much like how we view Deion Sanders, more so within our community, but football fans in general. The Mannings have been the first family of football forever, especially down here in the South.
Right.
So they were way more forgiving of Arch even saying that. They were way more forgiving of Eli. I know you're up there, so you saw it when Eli got drafted. He was barely holding the jersey. He didn't crack a smile. He was like, yo, this ain't gonna work. I told y'all, but y'all made this decision. This ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
And he stood on that. And then that's when the reports started coming out that, you know, the Mannings are like, we're against this, da-da-da. The public as a whole was way more forgiving of Arch for that. And for obvious reasons, we're gonna keep it real on here. It's a lot of motherfuckers that are racist. It just flat out comes down to it. Like, this black man said no, and we now have an issue with him. This white man said no, and whatever. Like, you know,
yes, right,
exactly. So, like, we gonna keep,
which is why I asked you, because I try not to look first into race, right?
Right. Okay.
But when I drew the comparison, when people are like criticizing Deion for saying that, I'm like, wait, hold on, though. Like,
Arch all the way outside.
Arch is all the way.
Like, we're not going to San Diego. Like, that ain't happening. Same,
because there's another Manning coming who's projected to be the top quarterback in next year's draft. So,
and y'all don't think that he ain't gonna do the same thing?
It can totally happen again. So I just want people to keep that same energy.
Absolutely.
If he's stepping the way that Deion just stepped, no, he's
Uh-huh.
not a college coach or nothing like that. But it's the same premise.
Absolutely. I mean, let's keep it real. When it comes to the whole reports of it was the worst interview, da da da, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
about his attitude and all of that.
Yeah.
Why is so many examples I can give you from my professional background where I've experienced that same thing. Like
Right.
confidence from me is like next to terrorism. You know what I'm saying? In some circles.
Yeah, me too. I've had job
Yeah.
interviews where I'm super confident.
Right.
Like, so, where I'm supposed to be, because I put in the work to get here. My accolades
Right.
speak for themselves.
Right.
They don't like it when you black and confident. They don't. They don't
real.
like it.
Yep.
It is what it is. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So that's why I had an issue with the whole thing. And I had questions because, especially when it came out about his character, I'm like, okay, well, he's confident, but we can't just sit here and not understand who his father is. So him being confident kind of coincides with just who he is, like where he comes from. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad character trait. He never got in the way of Colorado. He never got in the way of Jackson State being that confident. If anything, it helped those programs uplift with his quarterback play by him being that. You have to be confident to not play with the offensive line and be able to do what you do as the quarterback. You have to.
That's a fact.
So I don't know, man. I feel the way you feel when it comes to that, though, which is why I asked the question.
Yeah, no doubt. Like a lot of those coaches and scouts, they may not admit it, but everyone approaches situations and people with a certain bias.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not saying that every white person walking around this planet is the biggest racist in the world. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that.
Right.
But previous experiences, hearsay, all that stuff influences bias. And a lot of these times when it comes to work interviews and all that, we're just looking for you to confirm what we've already put on you.
Right.
If I think you're not a team player, I'm just waiting for you to go ahead and give me that layup so I can say, see what I was saying? See what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think during that process, I think that's what happened. A lot of previously made bias were just confirmed, especially with that report of the Giants. Right. But your second question, you said, you know, how much blame would I really put on Prime? I'm not going to say overwhelmingly that Prime is the reason why this happened. I'm not going to say that because for this whole past weekend and all the drama and all of the toxic, whatever you want to call it, conversations that have approached, Prime has done something that a lot of us would love to do, which is see their sons through their careers in football and become professionals. Like that's an accomplishment. I don't care that Shedeur got drafted 5th round, even though it's a lot of BS in between that story. But point A and point B for me is that I got my son got a college education. My son is now a professional, able to build his own legacy. That's a great story as a father for Prime. So salute to him. But when it comes, I will be honest when I say he does share some of the blame. And I think a lot of us, we shoot him bail because he's a legend, because he's Coach Prime. We're like, you know.
I don't shoot him any bail. I do believe he played a part. Like I said, I have 2 theories.
Okay.
Either one of them could be correct. When it comes to the facts of why I possibly feel that he switched, I do believe Deion played a part. Of course, bro, you're Deion Sanders. They're when they hear that, they're not thinking, okay, well, maybe there's give to what he's saying. If you hear anybody talk about Prime says what he means.
No doubt.
So if you have a concern that Prime's not going to let his son come here, well, why would I waste the 1st round draft pick on him, knowing who Prime is? So that makes sense. Shedeur's, what's the word for it? Complacency when it comes to what he feels like he deserves. I also do feel like that played a part. But I can understand that because I know who his father is.
Right.
I don't necessarily say that the confidence that he feels is 100% that. So that's when I push back on the The things that start to get to me is when I'm hearing worst formal interview
Yeah, that's
ever.
wild. Yeah, that's wild. That's
when
wild.
You start hearing stuff like that, it's like, bro, I'm sure you've had a worse formal interview.
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to sit here and tell me, as great as Deion Sanders was, is that he didn't have his son prepared. Now, how his son may have handled it with his confidence is a different thing. Yeah. But to be totally unprepared for a formal interview, and they didn't never
see that. You just don't see that, right?
Here's the thing: they don't clarify what they mean by formal interview either.
At all. So and we've heard wild stories about these prepared interviews and all that stuff.
Yep, and they always tell you, "Oh, we have limited information, but a source has told me that this."
Right.
So that's where my issue when it comes to colluding, that's what makes people like me jump to that. Because it's like, okay, if you feel that way, well, damn, give me the whole story. So I don't have to accuse you of colluding. Like, I understand they're a private entity. Teams operate, do their own best interest. They don't need to explain that. I understand that. But when it comes to how they assassinate a kid's character, not even necessarily like, of course, race plays into it. But we've seen things like this with Johnny Manziel, with Baker Mayfield. They were right about Johnny Manziel, though, so I give them that. They were totally correct about Johnny Manziel.
My guy was outside.
Yeah, he was outside.
Yeah.
I've been a huge Baker Mayfield fan. And Baker Mayfield had stuff happen to him off the field. Like,
absolutely.
He got arrested at college, right? So
more than once.
None of that stuff happened with Shedeur.
Right.
So when it comes to the assassination of a kid's character like that, without giving us the accurate information as to why, I've always had a problem with the NFL. And I'd always stand on that. It don't matter your color of your skin at all. Just the assassination of somebody's character. And you're not giving us the full information as to why you feel that way. And you just expect us to just live by what you're saying. Especially when we look at the tape and it's different.
Yeah, that's fair.
My issue happens.
I feel you, because that anonymous source shit is literally the worst thing possible. Like, I get it why you wouldn't put your name on something, but it's super bogus. And as a college football fan, I see it all the time, especially during magazine season before the season kicks off. You got all these anonymous coaches that say, "Well, this quarterback suck," and it's like, okay, dude, you could just be a fan if for that anonymous source shit, you know? We're both anonymous sources somewhere, you know?
Right. And I understand, like I said to you in the chat, I understand the anonymous source thing when it comes to journalism. Like, I get the importance of giving journalists information without fears of retribution for you telling the truth. I understand that. But in sports, unless it's like a situation like Donald Sterling or something that transcends what's happening on the actual court or field, to be anonymous and put your name on something like that.
Facts.
At least it's not even so we can criticize you for it. Put your name on it so we can reach out and get more information, so we have a better understanding as to why that report came out. That would help too.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of people, like we just went over. It's a lot of people that share the blame on this whole debacle of a weekend. If you're a fan of this young man, whether you're a fan or not, and that kid that Ulbricht's son who did the prank call, super lame.
And here's the thing.
That's super lame.
Here's the thing. Who's his father? Where did he used to work?
That's
tells
true.
you why I answered
That's
the way
true.
I answered. Because
that's true.
You used to be a head coach for the New York Jets. Like, even though you were temporary, you were a head coach for the New York Jets. How do you
for
let
over half
like
the season
happen?
Over half the season.
It's crazy. It's insane.
If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, and of course, look us up on socials at Suplex Dinner Club. And be sure to check out our other projects. We talk college football on Dogs versus All Y'all. That's a weekly college football podcast where we don't just talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. We talk about all things college football. The Life and Times Pod, which is short for the Life and Times of a Restaurant Lifer podcast, where I have some chill conversations with some cool and interesting people that I've met in my years in the hospitality industry. And of course, check out Talk 'em in the Building. That's a pro wrestling podcast where we solely focus on the promo. We talk about the talkers, we hype the hype man, and we pontificate on the promo. It's a fun project, and if you're a pro wrestling fan, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. If you're into TV and movie reviews, check out Four Corners Cinema with Ari and Adrian, a podcast where two lifelong pro wrestling fans review film and other forms of media that just so happen to have some of our favorite pro wrestlers. The Suplex Dinner Club family is growing, and I would love for you to be a part of it.